Welcome to a Monday morning recording of NBL Now. We are here with Code Sports and we are very thankful that there has been some basketball, at least, without the action of NBL. We saw the Boomers and the Tall Blacks meet for the first time on Friday night in the FIBA World Cup qualifiers. We've got them matching up again tonight in Wellington, and I'm here to talk it all out with one of the former Boomers and dual Olympian, Chris Anstey. Chris, how are you this morning?
Very well, Kelsey. No, it was nice to see a game of basketball, and a very good one at that. It was nice to see some nice young faces on both teams, and we got the close game I think we expected. And look, at the end of the day, it was a couple of big plays that made the difference, but certainly looking forward to tonight.
Yeah, thrilling come from behind win for the Boomers, 5 points. They take it away by in the end. How did you see those big plays at the end of the game, and were they by who you expected?
I don't think anyone would expect Will Hickey to shoot a dagger three down the stretch, but if you're ever going to shoot one, you want it to be late on the shot clock when you absolutely have no choice but to shoot it. So good on him. It was a big shot. It drove a dagger into New Zealand, but you know, the fourth quarter was probably one where both teams were very dependent on the three, and you were just waiting for one of the teams or one of the players to knock one or two down because it was a long dry spell. And then that's probably where we saw a little bit of inexperience through the playing group, that no one went and got on the rim when they hadn't scored a couple in a row, or no one got their feet in the paint. But I just thought that the swings and momentum changes throughout the game are really fascinating, and I probably found myself thinking during the first, without getting into the whole conversation of load management, but when you're representing your country, I don't think any country needs to go minutes restrictions or, even out minutes. Just have a look. If you've got a guy who's going really well in a 1 or 2 game series, let him go. And I thought we saw that at the start of the game. A few players were playing well. We got into our rotations and the momentum switched or swung. So it's interesting, and I'll be fascinated to see how they approach the game tonight, whether or not Judd Flavel gives more or longer stretches of minutes to some of his key guys before he goes to the bench, because I'd imagine a win for them, as important as it is for Australia to win this thing on home soil, I can only imagine the Kiwis are going to come out even probably more locked in than what they did the other night.
Absolutely. The Kiwis were pretty great in some moments of that game. Let's talk about Dean Vickerman and John Riley, the coaching staff for the Boomers. I want to ask around, did you expect to see the game style that they put out there? They definitely tightened the rotation in the second half. And like you said, Boomers were able to sort of pull away and find some ascendancy there. Were you happy with how they put those rotations out there?
Look, I think a lot of it, I think we'd be crazy to think that there wasn't a directive of some sort from Adam Capon, who's the head coach of the Boomers. I don't think any assistant coach is just given free reins without speaking to the head coach. So I'm sure Capes was watching from overseas and wanted to see, at least in some capacity, all of the guys with a Boomers uniform on. But as you said, once that had happened, the rotations tightened a bit. Was I surprised by the game style? No, I think the Boomers group and the Tall Blacks group as well, for that matter, need to start understanding the style of play that's going to be required when both teams start rolling players back in. And it's no point seeing a young basketball player put on a Boomers uniform and do well in a system that's not going to be replicated down the track if and when there's a major tournament. So I think all players need to start getting used to that. They would have got a small glimpse. No, I wasn't surprised. It was, I think I was on this show and I actually thought the Kiwis might have gotten up. And so I wasn't surprised it was a close game. I was pleased with how well both teams did.
Let's talk about 2 players that came out and starred for Australia. Jalen Galloway, Angus Glover. We'll start with Jalen Galloway. He's coined himself a new nickname, basically, FIBA Gallo. He's absolutely unbelievable when he puts that Boomers jersey on, and Friday was no different.
They're 2 guys that, and you're right, the last couple of times he's represented the Boomers, he's been great. Maybe that is a style of play thing because we haven't seen that consistently from him at the Kings yet. We've seen it, but not consistently. Angus we've seen probably a little bit more consistently with the Phoenix, but I think they're both in a position where if there is going to be a spot open up in a major tournament, they're the type of players who can knock down that perimeter shot. Because you look at the guards, we've got likely have Josh Giddey, Dyson Daniels, Tyrese Proctor probably. You know what? We don't have those knockdown shooters on the wings. You're looking at Matisse Thybulle perhaps, and some of these guys. That there might be a spot for one of those two guys. And I think anytime you put the singlet on, you are, hoping that the coaches recognise that you'll fit in and are able to remain when the studs come back. So those two have been super impressive. Part of the challenge always has to be, I wouldn't imagine the coaching staff only evaluates these players on Boomers. Yeah, they're watching every NBL game. They're watching the NBA games. They're seeing how they're going to fit this group together. So great for them both to have these sorts of games for the Boomers. And my hope, I would love to see FIBA Galloway through the NBL season and be that spark that the Kings need, because of all teams, they probably need that spark at the moment, as I digress to the NBL for a second. But good on them both.
Absolutely. Jalen needs to find that for the Kings, and I think the Kings will become even more formidable. Let's talk about the players who maybe didn't have the outings that they wanted. Jack White, where did you see his game? Keanu Pinder. And is there anyone else that you think needs to step up for the game tonight?
Oh, look, they both seemed rusty. They both looked like they'd travelled. I still thought Jack White made good choices down the stretch. The box score probably doesn't reflect the impact he had on the game at times. Keanu, I think, ended up fouling out, looked a step behind the game. And, the game in Japan is a lot different to what it is here, and the speed of the game, the physicality of the game is different. So, no, you're right. They both of all the guys stepped off aeroplanes. There had to have been a little bit of jet lag involved, all those kinds of small factors. But no, you'd expect them with one under their belt to be better. But look, I don't think anyone played poorly. Again, it's probably hard when you're trying to evaluate players who are used to playing high 20s in the 30-something minutes a game to come in for 3, 4, 5-minute blocks and then say, but they didn't do well. Sometimes it's hard to find the rhythm of the game that quickly. And again, you'd expect them with a couple more days of training with the group, a couple more days around the group, to be a little bit more settled for the game tonight.
Let's talk about New Zealand Tall Blacks. Mojave King, Flynn Cameron, Sam Menenga. We have so many NBL players currently playing for the Tall Blacks. Isaiah Leartha. Let's start with Mojave King, though. He really couldn't get anything going. He shot 1 from 10 from the field and just couldn't get it going. And that is so different to what we've been seeing him produce for the Cairns Taipans this season.
Yeah, and we did the preview for the Taipans, and he was the guy that I thought had probably been the most improved and had started showing signs of consistency. But again, then you go and throw a Boomers uniform, a Tall Blacks uniform. It's a whole different thing. It's hard to expect that level of consistency from such a young player who's been in and out of the squad and has had an interrupted preparation. So look, I still like the fact that he shot it. I didn't think he took bad shots, and I don't think he took shots outside of the structure that the coaching staff were looking for. So it's one thing to miss a number of shots. It's another thing to take a number of bad shots and miss them where your teammates don't know where they're coming from. So I don't look too much into his shooting percentage. I look at the type of shots he took, and I don't have much of a problem with that. I think he'll be fine. He is in, as you said, a very consistent patch of form at the moment domestically. And again, he's probably one. He's that same type of athlete as Jalen Galloway, isn't he? That you just expect him to be able to impact the game with his athleticism at various times. I'm sure he'll do that.
Who was your standout for the Tall Blacks?
Oh, look, I thought Tyrell Harrison was going to be, and then he went and sat down and hardly did a thing for the rest of the game. I must admit, since Flynn Cameron's played for the Taranaki years, and we've had him and watch him closely at Adelaide now, and I just think he's going from strength to strength with the development of his game, with the ability for him to shoulder the significant point guard responsibilities with Shea Illy injured, and Taylor Britt sort of not playing as well as what you would have gotten from Shea. I was really impressed by him. Yanni Wetzel, I expected more from. I'd sort of hoped he'd come back a lot more physically imposing than what he did, but seemed to be taking his time to find the rhythm of the game. But for me, it was Flynn. And again, it's another tick for the NBL in the way it develops players and prepares them to play on the international stage.
He finished with 15 points, 6 assists, 0 turnovers. He's really found a home, I think, in Adelaide and put a good one out on Friday. I want to ask you about the bigs, though. At times, we saw Sam Menenga and Tyrell Harrison out on the floor at the same time. They obviously have a plethora of bigs that they can choose from in the Tall Blacks. Did you like that combination? I never expected that we would see something like that out there.
You've got to be big in international competition, and Judd Flavel, the same deal. I think he would use this to have a look to see how often he can play. It's not if he can play two bigs together, it's for how long and how often he can play. Because you have to. Once you get to international competition, you're playing against large human beings, and you need two genuine bigs on the court a lot of the time just to compete physically. You just get out-rebounded, you get met at the rim. You need to be able to do that, and the more times you can get that done in games like these ones, the better. Did it surprise me? No. It did look like they were a little bit unaccustomed to playing together. And again, I'll come back to Yanni Wetzel. I thought that was where he might be the glue between the two, where he'd be the second big with those two guys, given his mobility and given his international experience. But again, I expected at game one, I would probably hope more than expect now that he's that second big and he can play with both those two guys for extended periods of time in the game tonight. But that might not be on the cards. He might be carrying something, I don't know. But no, international basketball, I think sometimes we're so geographically removed in Australia and in fact New Zealand from the European, the South American teams, Canada now, the North American teams. We forget the talent and the size and the rapidness of improvement they're making as well, because we're just watching our guys. So it really is a bit of an arms race, and size is important.
I love that. I think lastly, I really am keen to know that your thoughts on the game tonight. What changes for the Tall Blacks? Can they get this win? I think everyone was sort of thinking that this was the time that they could come in and get the win over the Boomers, just with the list that they've put together. How do you think the game plays out tonight in Wellington?
Very, very closely again, and it may very well come down to an individual making a play or two down the stretch is how I would imagine it goes. Honestly, can't pick it. In New Zealand, from what we saw, and probably the upside based on some of those missed shots that you mentioned. Look, I'll tip New Zealand on their home court again with no confidence. Of course, I hope it's the Boomers that get up, but expect a very, very close game. And I think whoever reviews the game is going to be talking about the big shot or the couple of big plays that a particular player made down the stretch to, again, put a dagger in the heart of the other team.
As always, Chris, love doing these NBL Nows with you. Thanks for your insight into this one. You can check out the Boomers and the Tall Blacks tonight. They're playing in Wellington. It's going to be an absolute cracker if Friday is anything to go off. Thanks so much for your time, and enjoy the hoops and NBL action back this Wednesday.